Well, and it really, it goes back to the first time, one of the first times you and I really talked, is you came over for breakfast. And you had to look at it, and then for some reason you really peel. There was something to that. I can't remember exactly how it went, but it was, you kind of got it out of me, the story behind that whole thing. That started it.
Oh, right then and there, yeah. Like
And
you went right into it.
And it was just kind of like that. I got thinking, and it was just kind of like, I think that was a story that God wanted to come up for a long time. And I never shared it. You know, I did with a game feed. That was people I never knew I could easily do it. But this, that was. I never even told Patty that story until right before. I was uncomfortable. It's the ones that you're closest to that's hard to share.
Because the way that I look at it, this, and as you shared your story too, is that this event, which was a success, came from a place of failure.
Which how many success stories don't happen that way? You had to fall down before you could cross the line, before you could really go. Life is always that way, you know, and with God especially.
So take me back. What led you to do an event like this?
You know, it probably, and it's like that night I explained how this happened. And I think that's probably where, okay, how did we end up having that event was in 1998, went on a lion hunt. And a friend of mine hooked me up with a guy out in Montana. And I stayed at another guy's house, that guy's cousin's house, because I couldn't stay with Lynn. Lynn was a hermit. He was a true mountain man. And that he, no running water, all that. He had some of his dogs lived in his house. Coon dog or hound dogs lived in his house. So it wasn't appropriate for other people, but I got to know the other people really well, and they had a strong Christian faith. And so we did that first year. I didn't get a lion, and so I had to go back the second year. I was happy to come back the second year because it wasn't about the hunt. It was about the people and time in the mountains, and snowmobile. It was a wonderful time. And the second year, that pushed me. That day when we got the lion, I mean, I came off of a long travel day, a long work week, no sleep, and it started at 4 o'clock in the morning. We got back to Joe's place at 6, so it was a long, hard day, 4 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that pushed me physically because I had to do things I was not prepared to do, and that's what pushed me. It was hard, pushed me mentally because there was a lot of roadblocks. Anything from, we lost the dogs for a few hours. It took us a while to find them. One of the dogs went missing. We ended up finding it. To a snowmobile breakdown. To the cat getting out of the tree and coming down, and it was literally from me to you away. And that makes you realize, makes your heart stop. But to going to the next tree, and that lion got a hold of that dog, and eventually that dog died. You know, that dog was, just like it happened in slow motion. To when Lynn picked up that cat, to after I made the shot, that, you know, he's a big man. He's over 300 pounds, and he threw his back out. All of a sudden I realized it was snowing. We had a snowstorm coming in. So all of a sudden we're miles from there. I was like, I got a problem. You know, so we got it done. But it was, so a lot of people have heard that part of the story. People I know see my lion in the house, they hear the story. But the story I never told up until recently was the what happened at the end of hunt. Was I was in the truck with Lynn outside of Joe's house, and he stopped me, or asked me, he says, when you sit down with them, do you pray? And was like, well, of course I do. And his response was, I don't, because I'm a good person. I don't need to. And I always said it, that Lynn was a good man. He really was. He was a gentlest. I mean, he took me on a lion hunt. He didn't know who I was. He just says, I knew I wanted to do it. So he did it. And I didn't say anything. I froze. So here's a guy who gave me a hunt of a lifetime, shared a lot of friendship, and things I hope I never forget that event, that hunt, you know, that time out there. And I had a chance to, you know, share something with him that'll be eternal. So like we had said before, it was a failure. And so I never did. 2 hours later, I was on a plane to Minnesota. I never saw the guy again. You know, we had phone conversations, but he's a hermit. You know, he moved on and lost contact with him. And I just hope and literally pray that still gets to me. Years later, somewhere in there, that he found God's grace. And so that was just an opportunity to give somebody eternal life. Let them know that there's love, God's peace, His grace. So that I never shared that story because I was ashamed. I never even told my wife, Patty. And so let's share it before. It's the ones that you're closest to that you don't want to share your faults. So, but it was.
So how do you get from that? You know, you go on a lion hunt. By the way, what inspired you to go on a lion hunt in the first place?
Always was on my. They're just majestic animals that are intriguing. It's hard to explain to people who don't hunt why you hunt. It isn't for the kill, obviously, but it's part of the. I mean, if you're in the mountains in December and it's snowing, it's a beautiful thing, and it's something to walk up on a lion when they're in a tree. I mean, it's intimidating, and yet just such an awesome experience. You see them when you walk up to them, and that you know, it's just like why I hunt deer, because I don't know, it's a hunter thing, I guess. You know, so
when you even look at scripture, so it says, you know, your enemy the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to destroy, and like here you're on a lion hunt and you get the lion, but the lion gets you in that moment. And so there's failure, and you don't, that shame, just, that's what I'm going to call it. It's just, you didn't speak up to what matters most.
Right.
And now you sit with that for years. And what brings you to the place, like, talk me through, like, how do you get to a place where you're like, I need to do something?
Yeah, it's so probably just a brief how I got to know Billy was Billy Molls, was at the Deer Classic at St. Paul, and I ran into him. I had a booth there. He had a booth just down for me, and came over, introduced himself. I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I'm a guide out of Alaska." I was like, "Well, that inspired." It, you know, got my curiosity, so I went and talked, and it was interesting. I talked with him. He was just a common man. He really is. If you walked in here, you couldn't tell that he's of celebrity status, and he was coming up at that point. But he, I watched some of the videos. I actually bought a whole bunch of them that day. I was there for 3 days. Went home, watched them. But it was that one. It was his last one that he had available at that time. I watched that one, and that's when his daughter was born. And you could see how he changed from the beginning of that DVD. And he even mounts that, you know, my daughter's gonna be born while I'm in Alaska. She, you know, his wife and his family are from Wisconsin, thousands of miles apart. And you could see the edginess of him because he's self-filming himself. And he had, you could see him talking on the satellite phone that he's talking to his wife, you know, you need to go to the hospital to have this baby. And you could see how amped up he was, that he was on edge. And we found out more about it that night, where he was really at. But in the video, you could see how it changed him, that he became, as he says today, he became a born-again Christian at that moment. And you could see, at least I think I can, without even knowing what he did, they became a born-again Christian. You could watch that DVD and see his life changed. And then I watched one of his other ones. Of course, I watched them all because it fascinates me. I watched that Spirit of a Sheep Hunter, and how he said he cannot, during that video, how he talked about where he needed to share his moment with Christ, his faith walk. And he was going to do it through his DVDs, and he knew that he put his business on the line, he put his friendships with others on the line, his relationship with clients, and none of it mattered. He could no longer look at his kids and not share and tell them how to live their life when he was not living his life the way God wanted him to. By that I mean he needed to share it, and there it is. And it was called a leap of faith or whatnot, but he did as he would say God wanted him to do.
And there was something in was there something in that triggered something inside of you, inspired something inside of you, where you started to share the same heart boldness that Billy had, and something was stirring in you to do something?
Yeah, it was at that deer class. I watched him. He started doing his public speaking, and you could just see how people would he's very talented when it comes to talking to people. I mean, he can just capture people in no time. Just a few short talks, he's got people captured. Somehow he has a gift. And I watched those people, and it's like, it'd be kind of fun to go to one of his events. And then during that Spirit of a Sheep Hunter, when he said it, he kind of put it in the video, he's doing these Christian outreach. And it's like, I think I want him here. And that got the mind thinking a little bit. I just didn't know how it was going to work out. Because we started putting the plan together to have him come. There was a few people I went and gathered with and talked to him. And then COVID hit. That shut that down. And then I forgot about it for a while, and then I actually had to do a wild game feed. I had to give a talk on my faith walk and that all of a sudden that inspired me a little bit. And actually you were there for that one. Mm-hmm. And that kind of started to plant in the seed. The next year it kind of opened up a little bit more. In fact, I went to the next year. I wasn't a speaker there, but someone else was, and someone said something, well, you're always going to have this guy, you're going to do that. And I didn't sleep very well that night. I just kept thinking all the way home from Winthrop. I kept thinking about that. How can we make this happen? And I didn't sleep good that night. And it was just, how can this happen? And I even in church the next day, you're giving the sermon, and I drifted off, and I was not paying attention. I admit it.
God was doing another work in your heart. There was something that he wanted you to just sit on. And it wasn't the words that I was sharing. That was for somebody else. He'd already given you the words. But it was
some of the words you were sharing. Because I all of a sudden just realized, hey, I'm not paying attention. I kind of woke up from my daydream, if you would. And the next words out of your mouth were, when God is speaking, you should be listening. And it's like, did I need a bigger 2x4 to hit me over the head? You know, it's just like, I think this needs to happen. And again, I didn't want to share that with anybody. What if I were to look at somebody who knows my family and that and say, I think God's talking to me. I think Tim's cuckoo. What up?
Well, I mean, it's true.
Well, yeah, cuckoo, but God was talking to me, and it started the process. And then when we, you know, I showed it to you, the video to you and Pastor Niebuhr and Pastor McCord, you know, we talked, and it was, go do it.
Yeah, so take me through that process. Like, so you come back, you feel like God is saying, you just have to go for this. So who, like, what is that process that you go through to start putting the timeline in place? And, you know, especially like some of the unknowns that are a part of that too, but you're just trusting, okay, I'm going to do the next step.
That was just incredible how that all happened. Because I literally walked out of that when the three of us met, or the four of us met. And I called Billy and I said, let's make it happen. And I picked a day. Let's just go for March. Well, I ended up changing it to April. But I asked him, I said, I imagine you need a down payment. And he did. And it was a significant amount of money. I was like, I'll get it to you. You know, I had no idea. I mean, could be written out a check, yeah, but I didn't know how that was going to go. And my gosh, it was the next day I was talking to Josh Bernau, and for some reason I shared it with him like the day before that. He says, well, don't worry about the money. The club will take care of it. The Hamburg Sportsman's Club, all things stepped up. I said, we'll take care of the deposit. It's like we've said before, don't worry about the money. God will take care of you. It doesn't matter if it's money or what. God will take care of us. So it's His plan, not my plan. That was God's plan. And geez, before I knew it, I didn't even pick the committee. You know, Josh was in. He says, "Hey, I got a couple other guys." Matt Yake was there, and Tom King. Those guys that Josh said, "Hey, these guys would be perfect." You told me, "Hey, you should talk to Ryan Luno." Talk to Ryan Luno, and it was just, and all of them have kids, young kids, and they're busy, and they run busy lives, and all of them wouldn't hesitate in order to make this happen. And John Niebuhr, of course, was in on it too. I shouldn't leave him out, but it was, John just saw it. He says, I want to be part of this. And it was just, every step, I thought there was going to be a hurdle. There was a hurdle. It just seemed effortless. Like it wasn't anything we did. I mean, even the Hamburg, they have it at the Hamburg Hall. The halls aren't cheap to rent. And the club gets a little discount because we do a lot for them. But I had to go present to the Hamburg Council what we were up to, and those guys looked at each other and they said, well, we'll just waive the cost. I mean, how cool is that? And then I went to the Hamburg Sportsman's Club, which I'm a member of, but in order to tell them what we were up to, and I mean, I thought we were going to be pushback on this whole thing, because not everybody has the same thought and what the purpose of the club is. And then not only did they cover the deposit without any question, they took care of the speaker, and they gave us told us, go, just make it happen. It was a large amount of money that they said they would you just make this happen.
So you talk about the plan.
Yeah.
What was your vision? What was the plan that emerged as you pushed toward the event?
You know, it's one of the people in the outdoors just don't talk. They don't talk about their faith. They don't even talk about anything. We're just out in the outdoors. Hunters and fishermen, we just don't express ourselves much. And that's part of the conservatives. That's just what people do. And, you know, heck, a lot of them don't even show up to vote on matters that matter to them, you know. But gosh, I mean, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have something. There's a connection between the outdoors and God, because people go to the outdoors all the time. People just say, hey, I need to get away. Whether you hunt or fish or not, if you like to camp, you go canoeing, whatever, hiking, people just want to get away. They need to not readjust, they need to do a reset. And because they don't want to be, they're tired of the screens, you know, screen time, whether it's computers, cell phones, phones ringing, you know, traffic jams, city life. That's all man-made. You know, that's where the sin is. When you go to the outdoors, God created all this. Everything that God created is perfect. We just don't get that connection all the time. We forget about it. We take it, you know, we take it for granted. It's kind of like God's word. We take it for granted. But yet you go to these places. I mean, it's like that night. I don't know if I expressed it properly, but have you ever been on top of a mountain and watch a thunderstorm come through? And you're above it. The lightning's one thing, but if you hear the thunder bouncing off the canyon walls, how do you know that God's powerful? If you've, you know, watched the sunrise on a lake, it's something to see. It's God's way of saying today's a new day. Your sins are forgiven. What happened before? Or, you know, I just remember sleeping under the stars in eastern Montana one time with a friend of mine. We literally slept outside. And you wake up in the middle of the night and you look up and you see nothing but stars. You can't help but think of what God's promise to Abraham was. You know, so there's a connection between that and our faith walk. For me, there is, anyhow.
And you wanted the hunting community, the outdoor community, to be able to come together and hear Billy's story, and to do that across the generations.
Yeah, yep. That as I was looking, just like I said, I didn't think this stuff up. It's just how everything comes together. You know, people always say, well, it had to happen. It was God's purpose. You know, it's bound to happen. No, that was God's purpose.
So talk about the event itself. Who showed up? What happened? What were... I mean, just like you do all this work of planning it, and then you're just, you know, it's there and it's done. But
it is.
What did you experience the night of?
That, you know, it was just, I sat there when I started seeing people come in. It's like, this is happening. You know, and I mean, it was just watching everybody come up. I mean, a lot of people were just attracted to that stage. That stage was cool.
Talk about the stage for a little bit.
Yeah, the stage. So we had a bunch of guys. There was a lot of people who brought their mounts in. And the line, which was the focus of it, you know, that was my committee. It said that line has to be there. And thus, they also said, you need to share that story. Sorry. Thanks. Get me out of my comfort zone. I thought I could just skate on by, but that they weren't going to let that happen. So that the lion was there. Just all kinds of different. We had elk there. We had wolverine, lots of deer heads. It was just something there that yes, this is an outdoor event. This is part of conservation, that we need to take care of God's creation. That was the hardest part of how do you put these two together, and somehow I think it came together. But watching the people as Billy started to speak, it was powerful. I mean, it really wasn't. I went around and I looked at people, you know, from a standpoint, I needed to get up and walk around a couple times. And I just happened to, you could see how people were, nobody was on their phone. Nobody was sitting there chatting, or nobody was distracted by anything. And their eyes were just glued on him, on every word he said. And it even made me, as much as I've heard him and known him for so many years, it was a very powerful. I mean, how do you explain it? It's like, you can't, you have to be there. And I'm glad it wasn't recorded, because people just, it's kind of like a church service. You don't get the effect out of a church service from a recording. Now, we can't always be at church, so every once in a while we got to zoom in or watch online. But it's the effect of that room. I mean, it just felt like the Holy Spirit was in that room. And I thought it was just me. But man, watching Tom King at the end.
Yeah, so, all right, so like you could feel the Holy Spirit there, and like then you start to see some of what's happening. So yeah, tell me what happened. What happened at the end of the event?
Yeah, so somehow you have to, how do you close it down? Something, you know, you got it. Yeah, thanks, all that. And I had no idea it was going to be that powerful. I mean, it moved a lot of people. And, but one of the guys in the committee, Tom King, I remember saying, hey, we got to find a way to say thanks for coming or close it down properly. And so I asked Tom King if he would do it, and if he didn't feel comfortable, you know, John Niebuhr would do it, and John would do great. You know, all of them could have done it. But for whatever reason, Tom just took a deep breath and, I'll do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll do it. And he just looked at John. He says, "Pray for me." but I could tell from the back of the room when Tom got up to do it, I could see a determination in him. I could just tell by his mannerisms that really affected him, and how he had said it. That, you know, he talked how he's a born-again Christian, and if we're all here for you. If you feel you need to come to Christ and you want to commit your life to Christ, we'll be back here and we'll pray for you. And watching him, I mean, it just, icing on the cake wasn't the right word, but it was an exclamation point to the whole thing. I mean, I have been a lot of parts, a lot of conversations, hard conversations over the years, some really neat events. By far, this one was it. And the messages that came, the words of people walking out, and you could hear all the conversations. And what you expect, you knew you did this in order to change lives. But it's when it happens that it blew me away the next day. The messages that came in. People have found Christ. I mean, we're not just talking that, hey, we found we healed somebody. That wasn't it. Someone's going to heaven. You know, how do you say that one person doesn't matter? That was it. If we only changed that person's life, and he had just shared he hasn't known Christ for a long, long time, he wants to be part of it. that's, yeah.
That's the Lynn the conversation you didn't get to have then.
Oh, the guy from Montana.
Yeah. And then.
That was.
Now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's others. I mean, it just some of the guys in the committee talked about how it changed some of the people that they invited that they were not expecting, and how that goes back. How some of them had their own story to share with somebody else. So
I look at the whole of this whole process, and there's this. I use the word bold. There's just something that God was stirring in. And he did it in Billy, Billy's story. So I want you to speak to this a little bit. Just where did you see a boldness come out of Billy, out of you, out of others through this event? And what was the point of that boldness?
I mean, the boldness going back to when Billy changed, or
yeah,
or
just
when, years. I mean, a few years.
Yeah,
ago.
it's just God stirring in people a confidence to just be and live out their Christian faith.
And I think you even talked about it. When you became a pastor, you made that decision. I thought of that a lot. Of your story. And how I don't know if it's boldness or God just says, you're going to do this. I'm not going to let you be comfortable until you do. I think it was Jonah. That was the same way. And I, going back, I just was not comfortable. And there's something, and Billy was the same way. I can't speak for him, but you could hear it when he talks about it. He was not comfortable, not without, God he wants us to do this work. And so I think that answers your question is, we're powerless. It isn't what everything we do is to God all praise and glory.
So now what? Event's done. Lives are being changed. But you're not done. What's the vision? Where are we going?
Well, and it was funny that when we first did it and we looked at this, we were already talking about the second year, and we were hesitant about it, but we couldn't help but talk about the future years. And so I think we all wanted to step back and was like, well, let's just do the first year, but we all knew this had to happen again. And it's going to happen. We just talked about the other night. This has to happen, and it needs to be Billy. And because God, at least it's going to be this time. Maybe others will come up, but I mean, there's so much for him to tell. I mean, he's been in the outdoors for 25, 30 years, most of it professionally. And a lot of those years he's spending time with people who are he would call a lot of those people that come into his camp or become his mentors, that they're leaders who are always inspiring him, and he's learning something from them. And you can't spend any time in the outdoors without knowing God's will, that God's learn. Look what Jesus did in the Bible. Jesus got away from people. Where did he go? He went, as he said, he went to the wilderness to pray. And Billy amazes me. The times when he was in town, we went out for supper and we spent other time together and that. And even when I talked to him on the phone and whatnot, he would often refer back to the Bible. And he's a very intelligent man. And I asked him, I said, how did you ever get to know this much about the Bible? Knowing that he really didn't spend his younger years, he talks he went to church, but he didn't really know Christ. And he says, well, I spent a lot of time in a tent and rainy days reading the Bible. And man, I've learned a lot from him. You know, he has a way of just speaking another language. I've learned a little bit from you too.
We're all learning together, right?
No, but it's, you know, that's one of the things about that night. I think you said it yourself. Other than John Niebuhr's a pastor, and he's a wonderful man too. Well, a lot of faith discussion among people who aren't pastors. The guys who got up on stage, Tom, myself, Billy, none of us are pastors. We just have the same love for Christ that we want others to know. And it was just, I didn't realize it until you said it that night. And I can confidently say each one of those, the people that on that, we were the committee, man, did we ever grow. And I mean, people I've known, but I didn't really know. And man, there wasn't a task that we had that we were concerned about. And it's just like everybody had an answer. We always got along. And it was just like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And nobody batted an eye. And so yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely got to have this back, and we got to make it grow. I mean, if we change one life this year, hopefully we change more than one life next time. But I'm pretty sure we change a lot of lives that night.
Well, and it's, you know, you talk about the conversation you were able to have with the gentleman who hadn't been to church in, you know, a decade or more, and then being able to connect him with the church. And sometimes it's like those big changes that you see happening, but it's like, what is stirring in the hearts of the people that were there that is seeds for what is going to happen in the future? Because there's going to be something there, like when you host this event again, that someone's going to say, I have the courage now to make an invite. I have the courage to be more bold in my faith.
You know, that was, you know, there's people from this church that went to that. And a lot of people from this community were invited. I mean, there's people from around the state, Wisconsin, Missouri, I'm trying to think of, there was another state, South Dakota, that were there. I mean, people just, you know, they heard Billy. They know him, but I think I missed your question. I'm sorry.
No, it was more of a comment. But okay, so let's say Billy Molls, like completely foreign name to anybody. Okay. You have 30 seconds, and you have to try to communicate who is Billy Molls. Yep. So you're like, Billy Molls is.
Yeah, and that was, how do you say it? And a lot of people came on faith, because we just said, I would like for you to come. And he's a guy from Alaska. He's a guide. You know, he lives in Wisconsin, but he spent most of his life up in Alaska. He films his hunts. You know, he's a born-again Christian. He wants to share that with others and his experiences in Alaska. He believes, you know, we need to take care of God's creation and that. And people came, just, you know, out of curiosity and that. But I think people who were there, I mean, we did a survey. I mean, it was just incredible, the survey results of people that we want to come again. So
what was your goal? Like, you hosted at Hamburg Hall. How many people were you hoping for? How many people showed up?
The Hamburg Hall holds 350 if everybody's packed in like sardines. We really weren't sure we wanted 350 people in there, especially the first year. I think it was 275 is what we had. I thought that was pretty darn good. To have 275 people there just on faith, out of curiosity. Now, you know, we have it next year, now what do we do? It's a nice problem that we hopefully we'll have to figure out. I personally would like for that to happen at the hall again. We need to do that. I'd like to see it expand a little bit more. Where that goes, I don't know. But I think Billy's willing to do it. You know, I know he's willing to do it. He feels he has to, because that's God's calling for him to do it. And he doesn't worry about the money. It's kind of interesting when I think about it. So hopefully we have him back. But he hasn't responded to me just yet, but he said he probably would. So
it's going to happen.
Yeah. And so one way or another. And so.
Well, like you said, like you feel called to it. And God won't let you, he won't release you from that calling. He's just going to bug you until it's like, okay, I relent. I will do this.
Yep. And, you know, one thing that was kind of interesting that night was for a couple of weeks, I had a nastiest cough. It was an annoying cough. It was annoying to others. I couldn't hardly talk to somebody for a minute without having a coughing fit. Then I get up, I have to tell my story for 20 some minutes. It's never an issue. I get off the stage, within a minute I was hacking again. Tell me how that happens. And so
we know the answer to that question.
I think we do. I think there was a lot of prayers going out for me, that a lot of them coming from me, but hopefully, you know, Patty even says, what are you going to do? It'll work. My gosh, it did. And so, never even occurred to me until I walked off the stage. And so, yeah, so that was special. So, that whole thing was special. So the people who came, it was amazing watching those people. You know, sit there and just listen and watch them. I mean, it really felt. It seems odd to say it or weird to say it, but it felt like the building almost was shaking. And I thought it was just me. I just mentioned it, one other person, I think it was one of the guys on the committee. No, I felt it too. You know, that's why you have to be there. It's just, like I said before, you have that at church, but it's not the same unless you're at church, sharing it with others. And I think that's what it is. You're there with others. That's what God meant us to be together.